we were talking in the realm of research, and it made me think of the gut microbiome.
Mhm.
And this has been something that's been very popular over the past, I'd say, several months at least. And I guess for people who may not know, can you describe what the gut microbiome is and its importance, right? Because there's been a lot of research in regards to linking the autonomic nervous system with the overall health of the entire body as well as the brain. And so I guess let's just start at the beginning and say, like, what is the gut microbiome?
Yeah, great questions. The gut microbiome is the healthy bacteria that live in your GI tract. Um, the large majority of that is in your large intestine or your colon. And actually, a third of our poop is made of bacterial cells, like the weight of it. And so there are hundreds of trillions of colonies of bacteria in our gut. And that's the gut microbiome. And the gut microbiome really informs how our bodies learn in terms of the interaction of the gut microbiome and the immune system. So, in infancy, as the baby's gut microbiome is developed, the immune system and the gut microbiome actually does this beautiful, delicate dance where it informs and educates our immune system in terms of what's self, what's non-self, what's an allergen, and what's harmless, and what's a bad bacteria. And this education is really, really important in terms of how the immune system develops. And so there's more and more research out now that things like autoimmune disease, things like allergy, have a huge connection with the gut microbiome. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, go
Go.
ahead.
No, you good.
And then your second question in terms of the autonomic nervous system and the brain gut connection, that's definitely a hot topic of research. I think probably in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll have even more. Right now, a lot of that is based a lot on the animal studies with mice and things like that. But we are finding that there's more and more of a connection between our brain, our emotions, our autonomic nervous system, which is like the fight or flight, which balances with the rest and digest modes, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system, and our gut. And we even know now that the bacteria in our GI system produce neurotransmitters. Not all of them cross over the blood-brain barrier to affect our brain, but it does potentially modulate or change the amount of neurotransmitters that our brain makes. And so I think as this research will evolve, we will definitely learn more in terms of how the food that we eat will affect the gut microbiome and how the gut microbiome affects our health.
Yeah, and for those that may not know, the autonomic nervous system. So there's three parts of the nervous system. There's the central nervous system. Which is like your brain and your spinal cord. There's the peripheral nervous system, which are the little extensions that come off from the central nervous system. And then there's the autonomic nervous system, which essentially is like the small little brain child thing that's like in your gut essentially. And why it's important is because the autonomic nervous system does things on its own without communication to the brain. So it has its own processes that it completes without the brain saying, hey, do this, do that. And so it's important because it's interesting the fact that there's this whole system in our gut that does things on its own without the brain saying, hey, do this, which is really, really strange, right?
Yeah, I think some of the nuances are that we have the enteric nervous system, which is in the gut,
Mm-hmm.
and then the autonomic nervous system, which is like the vagus nerve, which is in charge of the rest and digest, or the parasympathetic branch,
Okay.
communicates with that. And yeah, you're absolutely right in that, it's not a voluntary thing, at least to the extent that we think it is. There are ways to tap into it using some mind body approaches, like hypnosis, like meditation, where, even things like our heart rate and our blood pressure, we think that we don't have that much voluntary control over it. But if you're able to tap into that autonomic nervous system, you can actually affect some of those responses that typically we don't think we can control.
Yeah, and talking about the gut microbiome, there's this also talk about like good and bad bacteria, and I guess is are there good and bad bacteria, and how do we get more good stuff? I guess.
Yeah, great question. I think obviously it's such a complex system. It's hard to, say good and bad, although we often do.
Right.
I would say that, after things like a course of antibiotics, or after traveling and you get a bad infection, there's definitely what we call dysbiosis, which means an imbalance of the healthy and the unhealthy bacteria in the gut. And so when you have more of the unhealthy, then it can cause problems like GI upset, diarrhea, bloating. And then, then the challenge is, how do we get back to that normal? Or a healthy, balanced gut microbiome. And so one of my favorites is actually just eating healthier food. So, if you feed the healthy bacteria what they want, then they will proliferate and grow and get more, right? So for the kids, I always have these like fun kid analogies, but I think it'll help, our regular audience as well, is that it's kind of like the zoo. So if you feed, all the giraffes, all the grass, and like all the plant eaters, all the grass and the good stuff, then those bacteria will grow. But if we sort of eat things like candy all day, then you're actually going to be feeding the bacteria that love to gobble up candy. And then that type of bacteria will grow. And our human bodies are actually not programmed to digest a ton of processed sugar, because that's not what our ancestors ate, right? It was hard to find sugar cane and things like that. So our bodies are much happier when we get a lot of fiber. And so we want to give the gut microbiome a lot of fiber, a lot of healthy fruits and vegetables, so that we can grow the healthy bacteria.
And this is more of like a chronic eating of like bad stuff versus like in a direct acute, or am I wrong in saying that? Because I love cake, I love cheesecake, I love cookies, and like I don't want to every time I eat a piece of cheesecake thinking, oh, making those bad making those bad bacteria replicate. And so I guess the only time you really run into issues is when you're like chronically or like repetitively just eating these like highly sugary processed foods or whatever.
I think for sure it's definitely relative. And obviously I'm all for the good gooey chocolate chip cookie. Like who can say no to that? But I would say that, for my kids, we talk about sometimes foods and everyday foods, right? And so ideally you have your treat foods, and then you also have those everyday foods that you eat that keep your body going healthy and strong. And so you're absolutely right. I mean, obviously if you're having, cookies, candy, and cake 3 meals a day and snacks, then you're not going to have great, healthy, diverse bacteria in your gut. And that can definitely lead to problems.